You've probably been there. You're at the airport, ready to board your flight, and then you hear the announcement. A delay. Hours pass. You're still waiting. When you ask what's causing that delay, an employee simply says it's a safety issue. And you think, well, the airline probably won't pay me back for this, even though you have no idea what's actually going on.
If the delay was for safety reasons, the airline can claim it doesn't owe compensation.
We don't know as passengers whether that's a real safety problem for the whole plane or whether it's simply a small thing. We just can't tell. Only the carrier knows.
According to Transport Canada, that same scenario plays out tens of thousands of times every year. In 2023, the government signed a new bill to change those rules. It was supposed to come into effect by the end of that year. But now, 6 months later, as we head into one of the busiest travel seasons, still nothing's actually changed. So why not? By law in Canada, whenever there's a delay of at least 3 hours caused by an airline, the airline has to pay up to $1,000 to each passenger. But it's gotta be something within the airline's control. Like, say a plane goes for scheduled maintenance and it's out of service for longer than expected, and flights have to be delayed or canceled. That's a situation within the airline's control, according to the regulations, and it would have to pony up. But
if an airline isn't responsible for a delay, say there was really bad weather beyond its control, the airline does not owe compensation.
here's where things get murky. If the airline caused the delay, it was within their control, but it was because of safety issues, they also don't have to compensate passengers. Problem is, no one seems to agree what exactly that includes.
It's not really clearly defined what is a safety issue, what is not a safety issue.
That's our colleague, Sophia Harris, by the way. She's been covering the airline industry for years.
And that's why you have different interpretations, arguments, court challenges, etc.
Take this Air Canada flight from Vancouver to Toronto in January, for example. It was delayed by more than 14 hours. Norm Massey was one of the passengers.
I had quite a late night. I was hoping to have a little sleep. I said, where could I rest? Is there a place you could provide or that I could rest? He directed me to the far end of the airport where there are often benches unoccupied and a place to sleep. So that, along with walking around the airport for 14 hours, is how I spent my day.
Massey filed a compensation claim for that delay, but Air Canada rejected it, blaming unforeseen maintenance, which they admitted was within their control, but it was also, quote, required for safety reasons.
What are the safety-related reasons? I mean, it's a pretty vague comment. You got to tell me more.
If a carrier says, well, there was a safety issue, and that's why you didn't get to take your flight, who are we as passengers to say whether that's true or not? We're not avionics engineers, we're not pilots. Only the carrier knows whether that's true or not and to what extent it's true.
Technically, according to the regulations, a delay that is required for safety means required by law to reduce risk to passengers. Reduce risk to passengers? I mean, that could mean a lot of things.
For example, a pilot prior to operating a flight would conduct a final visual inspection of the aircraft to determine whether things like the engines, the landing gears, the other components for the safe operation of a flight are being met.
If those pilots do find something wrong with the plane, this of course would fall into that safety category. But consumer advocates argue airlines also have a history of interpreting what constitute a safety issue in a much broader way. To the point where critics argue the category has become a way for airlines to avoid paying up.
What consumer advocates and passengers argue is that airlines are using or may use this safety clause for anything that, for any delay that they cause. So you can just throw out the safety line. And how are passengers to know if it really was a safety issue?
Here's another example, a 2020 flight from Cancun to Regina. This one was delayed 6.5 hours. At least 2 passengers filed a claim for that delay, but Sunwing denied their claim because they said it was caused by broken pipes in one of the plane's bathrooms. And while they admitted this was within their control, in fact, an employee turned off a heater and caused the pipe to burst, they said they shouldn't have to pay because, again, it was safety related.
This was during the pandemic. It was March 2020, and the pilot felt it was important to have 2 working bathrooms on the plane. Right now, there was only 1 functional bathroom.
WestJet is also in the middle of a legal challenge over a similar issue from back in 2022, arguing that they shouldn't have to pay passengers for a 21-hour delay because their pilot called in sick an hour before takeoff, and a replacement couldn't be found in time. So that delay, they say, was also a safety issue.
The airlines will argue last minute problems. You can't point the finger at us. That's not fair. First and foremost, we want to have safe flights. We want to be cautious. Whereas the CTA says, this is a business. You need to run your business properly. You need to have staff on hand that you can call in. You need to turn heaters on in the winter to make sure your pipes don't freeze. You are responsible for these operations.
According to Transport Canada, in 2022, over 28,000 flights were delayed due to safety issues within the airline's control. None of these passengers would have been eligible for compensation. Right now, there's a backlog of over 72,000 claims sitting with the Canadian Transportation Agency, or the CTA, for review. The agency says the majority of them are from people who were denied compensation from the airlines for a delay and weren't satisfied with the explanation they got.
So you're denied compensation, and what passengers say is, you're not giving me a full response. I don't understand. I don't understand why I'm being denied. They're suspicious because they're like, you haven't justified your explanation. Therefore, I'm going to fight this.
The rules just aren't clear enough. That's what's supposed to be happening now, is a lot of more clarity brought to the rules, so we can make it much more clear to people when they should be filing a complaint, and so that hopefully they can get that complaint through the system much faster.
There will be no more loopholes where airlines can claim a disruption is caused by something outside of their control for a security reason when it's not.
That's Canada's former transport minister announcing last spring that this safety loophole would be closed, and that the only disruptions airlines could deny compensation for would be exceptional circumstances, like severe weather or terrorism. Immediately, the airline industry responded, making it clear they wanted this safety exemption to stay. So the government opened up a consultation process, and it was flooded with submissions. There have been almost 300 online, many of them coming from the airline industry.
Our concern is that there's a bit of a last-minute lobby underway from the carriers, who obviously would like to delay this as long as they can and or water it down. This is really becoming a very long delay, and it's very unfortunate for passengers.
One of the arguments the industry is making is that removing this safety exemption could actually put passengers at risk. They say they don't want pilots to feel pressured to choose between flying a defective plane and costing their employers money.
You don't want to penalize airlines for making the right call or put undue pressure on airline employees to operate in a manner which would compromise the safety of the traveling public, the crew, and the aircraft.
But some say there's not a lot of evidence to support that concern.
What consumer advocates argue is that the European Union has similar regulations where delays warrant compensation with a small list of exceptions, and we don't see planes falling out of the sky.
Advocates argue that's because pilots are the ones who decide whether a plane is safe to fly or not, and they're given free rein by law to do so.
In terms of safety, pilots always have the last word. We would expect that under these new amendments, the pilot will still have the last word.
Another concern for airlines is, of course, money. If this exemption is removed, there could be thousands, possibly tens of thousands, more delays they'd be liable to pay for, whether or not the issue was their fault or someone else's.
That includes federal agencies like the Canadian Air Transport Security Agency. You've got Nav Canada, who is the air navigation service provider in this country. You've got the airport authorities. And so all of these other members of the air transportation ecosystem have a role to play to ensure that flights not just depart, but depart on time. And when they're not held accountable for their actions, and the only ones held accountable are airlines, there's a real piece missing in that equation.
The CTA says it's working on drafting these rules now, and it's considering all sides as it decides what the exemptions should be.
We are looking at how to include how to factor in the airline input as well as the consumer advocacy input that we received.
When we asked how long that might take, they said the focus is on drafting solid regulations, not on speed. Another kind of delay that passengers are caught in the middle of.